Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of truth and bearers of soul, today we journey into the shadow, not to judge, not to shame, but to understand. For what lies buried in silence eventually rules us from below. In his private reflections, seldom shared, Carl Jung glimpsed into the enigmatic, paradoxical, and radiant depths of the feminine psyche. He called her the anima, not merely woman as seen by man, but the hidden feminine within every soul. This is not a sermon, nor an accusation. It is a mirror held up to the complexity of female nature, fierce, sacred, wounded, divine, often misinterpreted, seldom understood. Here are 5 brutal but illuminating truths. Diagnosis not of pathology, but of soul, meant not to harm, but to awaken. The feminine is often misunderstood, misrepresented as fragile, submissive, or docile, a delicate flower needing protection. But this is a distortion, not a truth. The reality, as Jung quietly reflected in the margins of his private journals, is far more powerful and far more unsettling. The feminine in her raw, unfiltered essence is not weak. She is chaos, but chaos not as destruction alone, rather chaos as the primordial wellspring of life itself. She is the storm before the dawn, the dark ocean before the formation of land, the whirlwind of emotion that births transformation. In every woman lies a force that is elemental, not crafted, not polite, not tamed by social norms. It is intuitive, wild, and deeply connected to the rhythms of nature, the cycles of life and death, of creation and decay. This force is not linear. It does not march forward in neat rows. It spirals, it dances, it devours what no longer serves and resurrects what has been forgotten. She is the womb and the abyss, the comfort and the threat, depending on whether you meet her with understanding or fear. But this energy, when unrecognized or denied, becomes dangerous, not because it is evil, but because it is unconscious. Power without awareness, direction, or form leads to chaos of a destructive kind. The feminine can then become manipulative rather than nurturing, seductive rather than soulful, controlling rather than receptive. She becomes storm without eye, flood without banks. This is not because she is inherently harmful, but because her essence has not been honored, neither by herself nor by the culture that surrounds her. Jung understood that the feminine psyche, left unintegrated, could possess a man or a woman entirely, pulling them into emotional storms, irrational fears, and compulsive behaviors. He called this the anima-possessed state. It's not an attack, it's a cry for attention, a signal that a part of the soul, the deep, instinctive, feminine part, has been ignored for too long and now demands to be seen. In our modern world, the suppression of the feminine is often masked as empowerment. We teach girls to be like men, to climb, to conquer, to hustle, but we do not teach them to honor their cyclic nature, their emotional depth, or their intuitive genius. We tell them to be strong, but we define strength only through control, not through vulnerability. As a result, many women feel disconnected from their bodies, their truth, their inner knowing, and many men fear the feminine because they have never been taught how to face chaos with presence, only how to flee or dominate it. But the truth remains: the feminine is not meant to be eradicated or silenced. She is meant to be met, witnessed, held, not in the sense of possession, but in the sense of reverence. When a woman understands this about herself, when she stops apologizing for her intensity, her emotion, her power, and when she learns to channel that energy with wisdom and self-awareness, she becomes unstoppable, not because she is louder, harsher, or more aggressive, but because she is aligned. She no longer hides from herself. She embraces the full range of her nature and learns to direct her chaos toward creation rather than destruction. Likewise, when a man ceases to fear the feminine, both in women and within himself, he stops trying to fix, label, or escape her. He becomes still in the storm. He becomes the grounded presence in the face of emotional complexity, and in doing so, he awakens his own deeper strength. The strength to contain chaos without control, to love without needing to dominate, to understand without needing to reduce. The feminine is not weakness. She is the ancient pulse of the cosmos moving through flesh. She is not a problem to be solved. She is a mystery to be respected. And until we understand this, both men and women will remain at war with themselves and with each other, searching for peace in all the wrong places. But once we do, once we truly grasp that what we have feared as chaos is actually the creative source, then, and only then, do we begin to heal. Then, we learn to dance with the storm instead of running from it. And from that dance, something beautiful, eternal, and true is born. In the hidden corners of the psyche, beneath the polite smiles and well-rehearsed gestures of kindness, lives a force far older and more complex than we care to admit. Jung knew this intimately. He did not merely observe behavior, he listened to the soul beneath it. And in many of his private reflections, he uncovered one of the most disturbing truths about human nature: that goodness, when performed but not integrated, becomes a mask, a beautiful disguise. And often, that mask, especially when worn by the feminine, conceals a far more primal archetype: the devouring mother. This is not the mother of nourishment, warmth, and unconditional love. This is not the open arms of compassion or the grounding presence of wisdom. The devouring mother is a shadow figure, seductive in her care, yet ultimately suffocating. She gives, but her giving is laced with control. She loves, but her love imprisons. She appears to nurture, yet she disables growth. And the danger lies precisely in how convincing her mask can be. She is nice, generous, selfless, always sacrificing. Society praises her. Children may idolize her. But beneath it all, her true hunger is to keep others dependent, to prevent separation, to consume rather than release. Why does this happen? Because somewhere along the line, the feminine in its maternal form gets its deeper role: to prepare the soul for individuation, not to smother it in endless comfort. True mothering nurtures, yes, but also allows for separation, pain, and autonomy. But the shadow mother cannot tolerate loss or independence. Her unconscious fear of being abandoned, unloved, or obsolete drives her to bind others to her emotionally. She gives endlessly, but demands loyalty in return. She appears to support, but secretly undermines. She creates a world where no one is allowed to leave her orbit, lest they be accused of betrayal or ingratitude. This shadow can manifest in literal mothers, but also in women in romantic relationships, in workplace, in friendships, and most painfully, within themselves. Many women, trained from birth to be good girls, internalize this role so deeply that they lose contact with their own desires, their own edges, their own truth. They become pleasing, agreeable, endlessly accommodating, all in the name of love. But this niceness is not rooted in genuine compassion. It's rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being unloved, fear of being seen as anything but perfect. And that fear becomes armor, a performance, a long, slow disappearance of the authentic self. Over time, the woman no longer knows what she wants. She only knows what others expect. Her smile becomes automatic. Her boundaries dissolve. And yet, somewhere deep within her, resentment grows. Not consciously at first, but in passive-aggressive comments, in guilt trips, in emotional manipulation, in trying to be everything for everyone. She slowly becomes someone no one can truly trust. Because even she doesn't know what she truly feels. Jung believed that this shadow archetype gains power precisely because it is not seen. It remains unconscious, operating beneath the surface, cloaked in virtue. That's why confronting it is so difficult. Who would dare question the kind, sacrificing woman? Who would accuse the loving mother of being controlling? And most terrifyingly, what woman wants to admit that her caretaking has become a form of control? But liberation begins with brutal honesty. It begins when the woman herself realizes that her niceness is not love. It is a strategy to stay safe, to be approved of, to avoid rejection. And that strategy, while once useful, is now a prison. The way out is not to swing to the opposite extreme, to become cold, selfish, or cruel. The way out is integration. It is claiming the full truth that the feminine can be both nurturing and fierce, selfless and sovereign, giving and boundaried. To remove the mask of niceness is to risk being seen, not as perfect, but as real. It is to let go of the need to be liked, and instead become trustworthy to oneself. It is to say no without guilt, to love without control, to care without collapsing, and most of all, to allow others, children, partners, friends, to become free, even if that means they walk away. This is not easy. It is a death of the false self. But on the other side of that death is a deeper kind of love. A love that does not consume, but liberates. A love that doth smother, but strengthens. A love that does not demand, but empowers. That is the true feminine power, not the mask of endless niceness, but the courageous truth of integrated love. A love that lets go, because it trusts in the soul of the other. At the heart of the feminine nature lies a deep, unspoken yearning. A longing not for surface connection, not for fleeting affection or performative attention, but for depth. The feminine soul does not want to merely coexist or to play roles assigned by culture or conditioning. She wants to be seen. Not looked at, seen. She wants to be felt, known, understood in her totality, her chaos and clarity, her shadow and her light, her wounds and her wisdom. But this desire for depth is not simple. It is not clean. It is not without fear. Because true depth requires exposure. It demands vulnerability. It asks the feminine to take off her mask, the polished exterior, the perfectionist armor, the self-sufficient performance, and reveal what lies beneath. And this is terrifying, because beneath the surface often lies a flood of emotions long suppressed, rage unspoken, grief unexplored, desires denied, and needs never voiced. Carl Jung understood this dilemma deeply. In his private reflections, he often wrote of the anima, the inner feminine, as a powerful archetype that could inspire profound transformation or wreak subtle havoc. She longs for connection so deep that it borders on the spiritual. She wants union, not just physically or romantically, but existentially. She wants a meeting of souls, a merging of meaning, a surrender into something larger than herself. But the very thing she craves is the thing she fears. Because depth requires surrender, and surrender requires trust, and trust requires being willing to be hurt. This paradox creates a quiet inner war. On the surface, the feminine may seem aloof, disinterested, even distracted. She may chase superficiality, indulge in fleeting pleasures, or hide in business. But beneath that lies a soul that is starving. Starving for a real encounter, a love that penetrates beyond words, a presence that stays when her beauty fades, when her emotions erupt, when her shadow shows itself. She tests, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Can you handle all of me? Will you still be here when I fall apart? Will you see my truth, and not run? And yet, when someone does try to go deep with her, to truly witness her, she may resist. She may push them away, emotionally withdraw, or sabotage the connection. Because to be seen in one's rawness, without makeup, without filters, without a script, is to risk rejection at the most intimate level. And rejection there doesn't just hurt the ego, it wounds the soul. This inner conflict is not a flaw, it is a call for healing. The feminine must learn not only to crave depth, but to become safe enough within herself to receive it. That safety doesn't come from others, it comes from self-intimacy. The ability to sit with her own emotions without judgment, to face her fears without fleeing, to trust her own capacity to hold pain and not be destroyed by it. When she can do that, she stops fearing depth, because she no longer depends on others to manage her inner world. But men, too, play a crucial role here, especially those in relationship with the feminine. A man who does not fear her intensity, who does not try to fix her when she cries or silence her when she speaks from her soul, becomes a rare mirror. He becomes a container for her depth. Not a jailer, but a presence strong enough to hold her without needing to shrink her. He is not seduced by her mask, nor afraid of her shadow. He does not offer her safety through control, but through conscious witnessing. And in his presence, she finds the courage to go deeper. Not because he saves her, but because he reminds her that she can go there and still be loved. This is the evolution of love, not a fairy tale, not a transaction, but a sacred space where the feminine can be seen in her totality, and still stand in her dignity. Where she no longer has to choose between being loved and being herself. Where depth becomes not a danger, but a doorway. And so, the feminine's craving for depth, and her fear of it, is not a contradiction. It is a threshold, one she must walk through again and again, each time more honest, each time more whole, until one day she no longer hides, and in that moment her love becomes something holy, not fragile, not theatrical, but true. When the inner structure is absent, when a woman has not developed the presence of an internal father, she inevitably seeks guidance, protection and validation from sources outside herself. Carl Jung, in his exploration of archetypes, often spoke of the necessity of balancing the inner masculine and feminine within the psyche. The absence of the father archetype is not merely about a literal father being physically gone or emotionally unavailable, though that can play a role, but about a deeper lacking, the absence of internalized order, strength, clarity, and grounded self-worth. The archetypal father represents boundaries, discipline, logos, the power of discernment, decision-making, and the capacity to stand firm in the midst of chaos. When this structure is not developed within a woman, her psyche remains vulnerable to disorientation. She may possess beauty, charm, and emotional depth, but without the stabilizing force of the inner father, she often feels adrift, emotionally reactive, insecure, or endlessly in need of affirmation. So she turns outward. She looks to men to validate her. She hands over her power, sometimes without realizing it, to lovers, bosses, gurus, institutions, ideologies, anything that promises to lead her or give her the structure she has not built within. She becomes susceptible to seduction. Not just romantic seduction, but the seduction of control, approval, and external definitions of success and worth. She seeks an authority figure to tell her who she is, what she should do, how she should live. On the surface, she may appear confident, even dominant, but underneath that is often a little girl, still seeking the father's gaze of approval, still longing for someone to make her feel safe and significant. This dependence breeds resentment over time, because what she seeks from the outside cannot satisfy what she has not built on the inside. She feels betrayed by men, by society, by the world. But the real betrayal is the abandonment of her own inner authority. When a woman has not developed the father within, she may also struggle to say no. She overgives, over-accommodates, and then collapses from emotional exhaustion. She may lack a clear sense of boundaries or direction. Her relationships may be marked by extremes, either excessive compliance or reactive defiance, because she is still trying to find the balance that only the inner masculine can provide. Without that inner compass, her identity is unstable, shaped too easily by trends, opinions, or emotional waves. But this is not a life sentence. The journey toward wholeness always begins within. The woman must turn inward and confront the parts of herself she has long avoiding, the part that is afraid of independence, that resents responsibility, that still hopes someone will come and save her. She must grieve the loss of the father she never had, whether literal or archetypal, and begin the difficult, sacred work of becoming her own protector. This means cultivating the inner masculine qualities of strength, order, and discernment. It means learning to make decisions not based on emotion alone, but on truth and alignment. It means setting boundaries and enforcing them, not out of fear, but from self-respect. It means standing firm in her values even when others disapprove. It means learning to lead herself, especially when no one else is watching. When she does this, when she reclaims the father within, everything changes. She no longer seeks authority in unhealthy relationships or societal approval. She stops over-explaining, over-apologizing, overcompensating. She trusts her instincts, not because they are perfect, but because she knows she can hold herself through trial and error. She becomes a woman who can both feel deeply and stand firmly, a rare and powerful force. In this state, she can finally meet others as an equal, not as someone hoping to be completed, but as someone already whole. She can love without clinging, support without losing herself, and speak truth without fear. She no longer needs permission to exist or express. She gives herself the validation she once begged others to provide. This is the integrated woman, the woman who has awakened both her inner mother and her inner father. She embodies the sacred union of eros and logos, of heart and structure, of fluidity and form. And in her presence, others too begin to remember what it means to stand in their own authority. Not through dominance, but through deep inner alignment. This is not about rejecting men or external guidance. It is about no longer needing them to fill a hole that only the inner father can fill. When the father is found within, the world outside becomes a mirror, not a master. And in that sacred realization, the woman becomes not a seeker of authority, but its living embodiment. The evolved feminine is not what the world has been conditioned to expect. She is not simply sweet, soft, agreeable, or passive. She is not confined to the outdated roles of caretaker or seductress, nor does she fit the mold of rebellion for rebellion's sake. No, the evolved feminine is something far deeper, far older, and far more powerful. She is a warrior of the soul. This does not mean she is armored, angry, or hardened by the world. Her strength is not measured by how well she suppresses her feelings or mimics masculine dominance. Her power lies in her radical authenticity, in her unwavering commitment to the truth of her inner being. She has walked through fire, not once but many times, and she has emerged not as someone who escaped pain, but as someone who integrated. She is not at war with the masculine, nor does she reject her own feminine essence. She has made peace with both within herself first. She recognizes that true power does not come from conquering others, but from conquering illusion, especially the illusions that once governed her own mind. She has faced the parts of herself that once terrified her, the needy girl, the jealous lover, the perfectionist, the martyr, the manipulator. She has not banished them. She has sat with them, held them, and transformed them into wisdom. The warrior of the soul does not seek attention. She seeks meaning. She is not obsessed with image, approval, or belonging to the tribe. She belongs to something deeper, the sacred flow of life itself. She listens not to the noise of the world, but to the quiet voice of the soul, and she has trained herself to act on what it says, even when it costs her comfort, relationships, or the illusion of safety. She loves fiercely, but without attachment. She can open her heart without losing herself. She supports others not from obligation, but from overflow. She speaks not to please, but to reveal. Her words carry the weight of someone who has died many deaths, and still chooses to show up with an open heart. Do not mistake her softness for weakness. It is the softness of a river that has carved mountains. Do not mistake her stillness for passivity. It is the stillness of someone who has learned to anchor herself in storms. And do not mistake her silence for ignorance. She is often listening to dimensions you've been taught to ignore. The evolved feminine is no longer trapped in the pendulum swing between submission and rebellion. She does not need to prove her worth or suppress her needs. She moves with grace and clarity because she knows who she is, not in theory but in practice. She has lost herself before. She has given her power away. She has shrunk herself to fit, but now she refuses to abandon herself again. Her presence awakens others, not through preaching but through being, not through demanding respect, but by embodying self-respect so deeply that others are inspired, or terrified to rise. She does not seek to dominate or be dominated. She relates from soul to soul, not ego to ego. This woman is dangerous to falsehood. She cannot be manipulated through shame or praise. She is immune to the tactics of those who live in masks. Her energy dissolves pretense and invites truth. This is why the world both craves and resists her. Because she exposes what we've all tried to hide. And yet, she does not shame others for their unconsciousness. She was once asleep too. She knows how painful it is to live in fear, to confuse validation with love, to trade one's voice for approval. That's why her sword is compassion, her shield is self-awareness, and her battle cry is silence that speaks volumes. The evolved feminine walks a path few are willing to take. The inner descent. She is not afraid to go into the underworld of her psyche, to face her shadows, to sit in grief, to burn down false identities. This is why her power is real. It is not inherited, borrowed, or given. It is earned. Through presence, through pain, and through radical self-responsibility. She does not need to be liked, she needs to be true. And when she is, truly, deeply, unapologetically herself, she becomes a living transmission of freedom. A force of nature that cannot be caged, controlled, or commodified. She is the warrior of the soul, not in armor, but in truth. Not with fists, but with fire. Not with dominance, but with divine remembrance. And when she walks into a room, the ground remembers its sacredness. Carl Jung did not fear the feminine. He revered her. He knew that behind her moods, mysteries, and madness lay a sacred force that could either heal or haunt the world. These brutal truths are not judgments. They are maps. Maps back to authenticity, back to integration, back to love. So, to the women listening, your shadow is not your shame. It is your sword. Use it with consciousness. And to the men, do not try to fix the feminine. Stand in your integrity and meet her in hers. Only then can the sacred marriage of souls begin.